Hello friends, welcome to Dreamweaver Crocheting with Love. In today's tutorial, we are going to learn how to crochet cluster stitch star pattern. You can crochet this pattern either larger or smaller depending upon what you want to make using this pattern, like a coaster or a placemat or a baby blanket. So you just need to work those many number of rows as needed for your crochet projects. That is, for a coaster you can work about 6 to 7 rows. For a placemat you can go for 15 rows, and for a baby blanket you can work more number of rows, say about 35 to 40 rows. Now for this pattern, the initial 4 rows follow a particular sequence for each row, and from row 5 to n number of rows that will be making for this pattern, it will follow the same sequence as row 5. So as we go through the video, I shall explain you that in detail. So without any further delay, let's start the tutorial. So for this project, I have taken a 5-ply woolen yarn and a 4 mm crochet hook. You can go for any type of yarn of your choice, and according to the yarn that you have taken, you can change the hook size as well. Now to start with our cluster stitch star pattern, first make a slip knot and work 4 chains. Now to form a ring, slip stitch into the first chain. Now you can also go for a magic ring instead of working like this. Now to start with the first round, work 1 chain, and we'll be working a cluster of 3 double crochets into the ring. So for that, yarn over, insert your hook into the ring, pull the yarn over and go to the first 2 loops. Now we won't be completing this double crochet. Again yarn over, insert your hook into the ring, pull the yarn over and go to the first 2 loops. We are having 3 loops on hook, yarn over, again insert your hook into the ring, pull the yarn over and go to the first 2 loops. So in all we are having 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all the 4 loops. So here we have done the first double crochet cluster of 3 double crochets. Now work 2 chains. Now this sequence will be repeating 4 more times. So going into the ring, again work a cluster of 3 double crochets. So here I am having 4 loops on my hook, yarn over and pull through all the 4 loops and work 2 chains. So repeat the sequence for 3 more times till you have in total of 5 double crochet clusters into the ring. So for the first round, in all I have worked 5 double crochet clusters, and after each cluster I have worked a chain 2 space. Now after working the last cluster, I have worked 2 chains. Now to end the first round, slip stitch on top of the first cluster stitch. So that completes the first round. Now for the second round, work 1 more slip stitch so as to reach the chain 2 space between the clusters. Now work 1 chain. Now in this round, into each of the chain 2 spaces, we will be working 2 groups of cluster stitches separated by chain 2 spaces. So going to the first chain 2 space, we will be working the first cluster of 3 double crochets. So I have done with the first cluster stitch. Now work 2 chains. Now going into the same space, again work one more cluster stitch. So this is the second one. Work 2 chains. So this sequence will be repeated into each of the chain 2 spaces. That is, you will be working 2 groups of double crochet clusters followed by chain 2. So here I have almost come towards the end of the second round, and in this round I have worked 2 groups of double crochet cluster stitches into each of the chain 2 spaces, and after working each cluster stitch I have worked a chain 2. Now to complete this round I have worked a chain 2 and slip stitch on top of the first cluster stitch. In total, I have worked 10 cluster stitches followed by 10 chain 2 spaces. Now for the third round, again work a slip stitch into the chain 2 space, and the sequence of this round is same as the second round. So first work one chain, and going into this chain 2 space, we will be working 2 groups of double crochet clusters separated by chain 2 spaces. So here I work the first cluster stitch. Now work chain 2, going back into the same space, work the second one. Followed by 2 chains. Now this sequence will be repeated into each of the chain 2 spaces. So moving to the next chain 2 space, work 2 groups of double crochet cluster stitches. So continue working like this till the end of the round. So here, as you can see, I have done with the third round, and as mentioned I have worked 2 groups of double crochet cluster stitches into each of the chain 2 spaces, and in between the cluster stitch I have worked a chain 2. So for the third round in total I have worked 20 cluster stitches followed by 20 chain 2 spaces. After working the last chain 2 space, I have slip stitched on top of the first cluster stitch. Now we shall start with the fourth round, and in this round we will be making a transition from a circle shape to star shape. So for that, first work a slip stitch into the chain 2 space, and into the space work the first cluster stitch. So make a chain 1 and going back into the same space work a cluster of 3 double crochets. So here I have done with the first cluster stitch. Now work 2 chains, and going into the next chain 2 space we will be making the first point of our star. So for that, going into the space work a cluster stitch, make 2 chains, going back into the same space work the second cluster stitch, so after working the second cluster work 4 chains, and going back into the same space again we will be working 2 groups of cluster stitches. So this is the third one. Work 2 chains and into the same space work the fourth cluster. Followed by 2 chains. Now moving into the next chain 2 space, work a cluster of 3 double crochets. Followed by 2 chains. So here we have done with the first point of our star. Now to make the second point, we will be skipping the next chain 2 space and moving into the next, we shall repeat the sequence, that is work a 3 double crochet cluster, followed by 2 chains, and into the next chain 2 space we will be working the second point, that is first work 2 groups of 3 double crochet cluster, this is the first one, work 2 chains, going back in the same space work the second one, now work 4 chains, and into the same space work 2 more groups of 3 double crochet clusters. This is the third one, work 2 chains and into the space again work the fourth double crochet cluster. Followed by 2 chains. Since we are working nearly about 4 clusters into chain 2 space, it will be quite congested. Now moving to the next chain 2 space, work a 3 double crochet cluster. Followed by 2 chains. Now skip the next chain 2 space and repeat the sequence for making the third point of our star. So just continue with the sequence till you have done with total of 5 points for the star. So here as you can see, I have worked the 5 points for the star, and after working the last point, that is the 5th point, I have one chain 2 space left. So I will be skipping this chain 2 space, and to end the round, slip stitch on top of the first cluster stitch. So that completes our 5th round. Now for the 6th round, work one more slip stitch into the chain 2 space, and in this round before the chain 4 space we have 2 chain 2 spaces. So into each of the chain 2 space work a 3 double crochet cluster followed by chain 2. So first work one chain and going into the space work the first cluster, followed by 2 chains. Into the next chain 2 space work the second cluster, followed by 2 chains. Now in this chain 4 space we will be working the first point comprising of 2 groups of cluster stitches followed by chain 4 and 2 more groups of double crochet cluster into the same space. So here, as you can see, I worked the first point for the star. Into the next 2 chain 2 spaces, we'll be working a double crochet cluster of 3 double crochets. Followed by 2 chains. Into the next chain 2 space, again work a cluster. Followed by 2 chains. So that makes the first point of the star. Now when you move from one point to the next point of the star, we will be skipping the chain 2 space in between. So this is a chain 2 space that needs to be skipped. And again repeat the sequence, that is into the next 2 chain 2 spaces we will be working cluster stitch followed by chain 2. Into the chain 4 space, work the point as done over here, that is 2 groups of double crochet cluster followed by chain 4 and 2 groups of double crochet cluster all into the chain 4 space. And into the next 2 chain 2 spaces, again we will be working a double crochet cluster followed by chain 2. And just don't forget to skip the chain 2 in between the points of the star. So just continue with the sequence till the end of the round. So here I am done with the 5th round, and after working the last cluster stitch, I have skipped the 2 chains in between and slip stitch on top of the first cluster. So that completes the 5th round. Now as I mentioned, for the next rounds, that is from round 6 to n number of rounds that you will be making, you have to just repeat the sequence of round 5. That is, you will be slip stitching into the chain 2 space after the first cluster, and into each of the chain 2 space before the chain 4 space, you will be working a cluster of 3 double crochets followed by chain 2, and into this chain 4 space, work 2 groups of double crochet cluster stitch followed by chain 4 and 2 groups of double crochet cluster stitch into the same space. And then into the next chain 2 spaces of this point, we will be working a double crochet cluster of 3 double crochets plus chain 2. And just don't forget to skip this chain 2 space when you move from one point of the star to the next point. Now in case if you tend to forget the chain 2 space that needs to be skipped between the points, then I would like to suggest is that put stitch markers into these chain 2 spaces so that you can easily skip them. Also, if you are planning to do a coaster with this pattern, then I think 5 rows are enough. But in case if you are going for a placemat or a baby blanket, then you can work more number of rows accordingly, depending upon the size of the placemat or the blanket that you need. Also, you can change yarn colors after every 2 to 3 rows, following the same sequence of round 5, so as to create colorful placemats or baby blankets. So whatever project that you're doing, remember that the last row of this project should be a row of single crochets so as to create a neat bordering around this star pattern. So in order to create the bordering, work a slip stitch into the chain 2 space and work 1 chain. Now into the chain 2 space, we will be working 2 single crochets. Now skip the cluster stitch and moving to the next chain 2 space, work 2 single crochets. Again skip the next cluster stitch and into the chain 2 space, work 2 single crochets. Now into the chain 4 space, here we will be working about 6 single crochets. Now into each chain 2 space that follows, we will be working 2 single crochets. Now into this chain 2 space between the points, instead of working 2 single crochets, just work 1 single crochet. Now moving into the next point, into each of the chain 2 spaces, work 2 single crochets followed by 6 single crochet into the chain 4 space. Again, continue working 2 single crochets per chain 2 space, and in between the chain 2 space which we usually skip, we'll be working just 1 single crochet. So just continue with this sequence till the end of the round. So as mentioned, I worked a round of single crochets around the star shape, and after working the last single crochet, I've cut the yarn, worked a seamless join, and weaved in all the loose ends. So that completes our clustered pattern star shape tutorial. I hope you found this tutorial really very useful and interesting too. In case of any queries, please let me know through comments. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.